Hello and welcome back, it's good to see you. This week's episode of Moon Knight strips everything back, leaving us with little more than Mark, Steven, their tormented past and a friendly hippo god, helping them in their race against time to get Mark back to the land of the living. And despite being stripped back, this episode proved to be one of the strongest of the season and one of the best pieces of anything Marvel Studios has ever put out, largely due to Oscar Isaac's captivating performances throughout. This episode mirrors WandaVision's 8th episode in that it heavily focuses on the main character's past, their trauma and how it can bring them back to reality. I'm just hoping that Moon Knight can stick the landing with the last episode where WandaVision stumbled to balance a pack last episode, although Moon Knight has been operating on a consistently higher level than WandaVision, so I'm hoping that they can pull it off. We learned that Mark and Steven were trapped in the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, and the mental asylum they were in was part of the bolt guiding them through the underworld, while their hearts were being weighed against the feather of truth to determine whether or not they could pass on to the field of reeds. And of course, their hearts do not balance the scales against the feather of truth, and they're told that they have to achieve balance by the end of their journey, or they will be dragged into the underworld. So Mark and Steven race to reconcile their past in order to get back to Earth to stop Arthur Harrow from unleashing Amit's wrath. This episode had a number of little nods to previous episodes. For example, Mark as a young boy saying "Laters Gators" to his mum as they were leaving, a nod to how Stephen Grant would end his voicemails to his mum, or Mark's little brother drawing a goldfish with one fin smaller than the other, a nod to Stephen Grant's infamous fish Gus. And Tourette brings up the ancestral plane when she's talking about different forms of the afterlife. The ancestral plane being the afterlife we see in Black Panther, a rare wider MCU connection for the show. And once again we get another hint towards the enigmatic Jake Lockley. The first time we see Mark in the room with Dr. Arthur Harrow, he's a little beat up looking, he's got a bandage on his nose, he sounds a little different to Mark and he's behaving more erratically. I actually think this was our first on-screen look at Jake Lockley, as the next time we're in that room, there's no bandage and Mark's back to behaving more like himself, and the time after that, it's Steven in the room. One time for each personality. I stand by that we'll see Jake at the very end of the season, and that'll be our lead into season 2, if we're lucky enough to get one. It turns out that the other rooms in the asylum were actually fragments of Mark and Steven's core memories, and they journey through Mark's dark past to reveal that he actually had a younger brother who died in a cave. Mark's mother blamed him for the death of his brother as she told them not to go into the cave when it was raining, which it was, and proceeded to subject him to years of mental and physical abuse, leading him to create the Stephen Grant altar inspired by his favourite movie The Tomb Hunter to shield himself from the years of abuse. I know I've been saying every single week that Oscar Isaac has been killing it, but this episode was undoubtedly the best we've seen from him. Having it play two different characters experiencing two different sides of the same trauma in the same scene as one another, that's just outstanding. With Mark being haunted by his time as a mercenary and trying to protect Steven from the abuse that he endured, to Steven having to face said abuse while also coming to terms with the death of his own mother, and the realisation that Khonshu basically manipulated Mark into becoming Moon Knight, both characters went through an awful lot in a very short space of time. I think it's fair to say that this show would not be the same without Oscar Isaac, and that's not me saying he's the greatest actor of all time. He is very, very good, but it's his enthusiasm for the role and the characters which make him such a good fit for this show. I really liked that they employed the use of longer takes, or it made it look like longer takes in the dialogue exchanges between Mark and Steven. It really added to the intensity of the episode. Unfortunately though, facing their pasts and trauma wasn't enough to balance the scales, and Mark and Steven are attacked by beings of the underworld who try to drag them off of the ship and into the underworld. Mark is overpowered and Steven defies his usual timid self, grabs a baseball bat and goes to town on them, saving Mark but at the very last second falling overboard and into the sands of the Duat. And it's here that we and Mark learn that in order for the scales to become balanced, Mark must let Steven go. I see now why they introduced us to Steven in episode 1 instead of Mark. It's so that they could do this to him at the end of episode 5 and tear out all of our collective hearts. I'm fine by the way, not traumatised at all. And that's all I've got for you this week. A bit of a shorter one because this episode was, like I say, a stripped back race against time, which wasn't a bad thing. This was still one of the strongest episodes of the season, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how they wrap it up with a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time to do it. What did you think of the episode? Leave a comment and let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.